Well, I'm back on YouTube, and this time with a video about film photography. So my last two videos were both made on assignment for my video production course that I was taking at high school, but I'm no longer taking that course. As you can imagine, that was about 2 years ago. And I'm just making a video because I wanted to make a video about shooting film. So I started shooting film a bit more than a year ago, and this year at the end of May and beginning of June, I had the opportunity to go to Norway, specifically the Lofoten Islands, with my family. And while I was there, I shot 3 rolls of film. 2 rolls were Kodak Ektar 100, and 1 roll was Kodak Ektachrome E100. And I shot with a Nikon F and a Nikon F2. To start, getting to the Lofoten Islands is a bit of a trick in and of itself. I live in England, so I flew from London to Oslo, and then from Oslo to Bodø, which I think is how you say it. If there are any Norwegians in the comments, please let me know. And and then once we were in Bodø, we were there for a couple of days. And Bodø isn't the Lofotens, for those who aren't familiar with that part of Norway. It's a largish port city nearby. And so while we were there, we went to some nearby just kind of nice mountainy areas on the coast, and took a few photographs, but they weren't anything special. The light was below average, and I know that's not really an excuse, but it was kind of my first day, and I was getting used to it, right? After waiting 2 days in Bodø, we tried taking the 1 p.m. ferry to Moskines in the Lofotens, but we couldn't get on that ferry because there weren't enough spots, so we had to wait until the 9 p.m. ferry. 8 hours of waiting at a port isn't fun, but let me tell you, the wait was worth it. At 11:30 p.m., the Lofoten Islands in all of their glory came into view, backlit by the late evening sun. This was quite the experience. It was crazy. I mean, I walked out onto the front deck, super, super windy, super, super cold, but you're just being blasted by this crazy sunlight and this insane view. And I took 3 photos while I was out there on the boat, on the front of the boat. And if I'm honest, I have no idea which one's my favorite. We arrived in Moskines a bit past midnight, and on our way to our Airbnb, I stuck the Nikon F2 out the window and took this shot. Once we arrived, I quickly set up the F2 on my tripod for one last photo before going to bed at 1 in the morning. The next day, my family and I walked around the town of Rena, enjoyed all the nice views, but we were just trying to catch up on all the sleep that we lost, so nothing too crazy. That evening, my parents and I decided to hike Reinenbringen, which is about a 450-meter ascent, kind of straight up the mountain to a very, very dramatic viewpoint. that last shot I took was one of my favorites, if not my very favorite from the whole trip, and I printed it big. Really big. The next day, we took a ferry to a more remote area and went on a nice hike. I loaded up some Kodak Ektachrome E100, and I must say I was pretty happy with how it turned out, especially for this being only my second time shooting slide film. The next morning, the weather took a turn for the worse, and all the light that I had grown to love had gone gray. All that being said, I still got a couple of shots I was pretty happy with. I was quite happy with how this shot turned out. I took about 20 minutes composing and taking light meter readings for it, so I'm glad it turned out all right. The next day was a lot of driving and then a lot of beach, and as you may know, cameras and sand aren't the most dynamic duo, so I took this one photo and then put my camera back in the car. Can't say it's anything special, but it's alright. We were now on the west side of the islands, which meant the midnight sun, but before that, I took a couple of photos of the mountains across from our Airbnb. The second shot turned out really underexposed for some reason. I think it may have been because I was using a polarizer and I didn't meter through the polarizer because I was using my phone to meter. But regardless, I was able to make it somewhat presentable in Lightroom. Now for the midnight sun. We drove to a nearby beach, and I completely fried my rods and cones staring straight into it, but it was worth it. Credit actually goes to my sister for this shot because I, for some reason, didn't take any photos that were straight into the sun this time. As you can see, the light was very, very red. I think that the reds actually blended really nicely with the Kodak Ektachrome blues to create this sort of magenta indigo cast in this simple beach composition. On the way back to our Airbnb, we stopped by this nice little church on the coast. I only took one photo, but that's alright. I actually really enjoyed the minimalist shooting style that comes with film. Between this shot and the shot of the sun coming through the fjord, I don't know which one I like better. They might be my two favorite photos I've ever taken, if I'm honest. There's also something to be said about halation. Generally, I think halation is overused and often detracts from an image that would otherwise be quite nice. But in this case, I think it's the cherry on top. The way it makes the church glow is just amazing, and I don't think I would have this photo any other way. The next 2 days were us driving back to Bodø. I took a couple of shots, but I was almost out of film, so I didn't take too many. To wrap things up, I'm really happy with all the photos turned out. And even if they didn't turn out, that would be okay because it was still a great time with the family. The Lofotens will always hold a special place in my heart, and I'd love to go back and visit sometime. Maybe shoot some medium format, who knows. But that being said, there is definitely something to say about 35mm. I really, really enjoy the format, especially when I'm using these Nikon SLRs. There's just something about the rugged build quality, the overall reliability, as well as the access to great glass that just makes them great cameras. But really the most important thing to me is I can make the images that I want to make with them, and that can't be said about every camera. Before I switched to my Nikon FM2 and this Nikon F. I actually had a Canon AE1 because that's the beginner camera that everyone recommends. And I made some nice images, but it just wasn't quite what I needed. And I really enjoyed using the F2 and the F. I didn't use the FM2 this time. I let my friend actually borrow it while I borrowed his F2. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.